I'm here to talk about internet scams with a touch of artificial intelligence. Have any of you started using artificial intelligence and looked into it? Okay, I see a couple of hands. We'll talk about that. I actually used to do these type of presentations for a living as a cybersecurity professional for a company called Tyler Technologies, just a little bit east in Yarmouth. Even though I've done hundreds of these presentations, I always get nervous at the beginning. So what I do is I take a deep breath and check to make sure my fly is zipped up. I've lived in Maine for 11 years, but my wife and I are originally from Kansas. We absolutely love it here. And one of the things I love to do is e-bike along the Maine coast, as you will see in this picture. Clever looking bike. This isn't really me, but an AI-generated image of who I wish I really was. My wife wishes I was this guy too. The thing about these AI tools, they're very easy to use. Anyone can use them, including everyone in this audience. The problem is, these tools in the wrong hands can make for very convincing scams. We'll talk about that. When it comes to AI, here is the basic truth. You will not be able to distinguish the real from the AI. A month ago, my wife saw this picture in her Facebook feed that there was a Golden Girls reboot featuring characters we've known and loved from Saturday Night Live. Sadly, I had to tell her, no, this is not true. This was an AI-generated image. And so, no, there's not going to be a Golden Girls reboot. Darn it. But then, you always have to ask yourself, when you see something like this, is it true? But then there's a rumor, there's a new season of Ted Lasso coming out. Are there any Ted Lasso fans here? Okay, I see a couple of them. Well, first thing I thought was, yeah, another AI-generated fake news. But actually, it is true. So how do we find out what's true and not true? What we need to do is go to our trusty search engine and simply type it in. In this case, I went to Google and typed in Ted Lasso Season 4. And what I'm kind of looking for is any links that reference a reputable site. Reputable site. In this case, I found a New York Times article about Season 4 and found that it is indeed true. That's how I found out it was true. I didn't take it at face value. That's important. Speaking of search engines, and I want to be kind of taken aside here, when you do a search, be very careful of sponsored links. When you see sponsored in front of the link, that tells you someone has paid Google to have the link show up on top of the search results. Merchants do this all the time, and for the most part, that's okay. But scammers can purchase sponsored links as well. I mean, Google tries to stop it, but they can't always. So you really have to be careful when you before you click on a sponsored link. The best thing to do is go past the sponsored link and click on a non-sponsored link. Does that make sense? You may not think you're using artificial intelligence, but you probably are. Have you gone to your search engine, typed in the question, and all of a sudden you get an explanation about what it is that you're searching for? It wasn't a link. They saw that I was searching for OTC hearing aids, over-the-counter hearing aids, and before they gave me a link, they tried to describe for me what OTC hearing aids are. That's artificial intelligence. So I didn't even have to click on the link to get the answers I was looking for. In fact, we were starting to think that instead of using Google search to find the answers, we're going to be using AI, because AI gives you the answers right at your face. You don't have to click on links and whatnot and look at web pages. So that's some cool things AI can do. But let me ask you this. Do you think artificial intelligence can be used to manipulate public opinion? Absolutely, of course. You may have heard, I don't know if you saw the story in the paper the other day, but there was a man in South Portland, where I live, who was arrested in an extreme hoarding case with 58 cats in his house. Maybe you recognized the gentleman who was arrested. This is a fake AI-generated news story. All I had to do was tell AI, create a news story about a South Portland man named Andy Chandler who was arrested for hoarding and had 58 cats in his house. And that's what it created for me. All I had to do was add my picture. That's it. Pretty amazing what AI can do, good and bad. But when you look at the scams we see today, and some of you are going to be talking about the scams that you've experienced, it's the same scams we saw 20 years ago. It's just that with AI, they're dressing it up to make it more clever, more personal, easier to fall for. One of the scariest scams we see these days is scammers using AI to clone your loved one's voice. In other words, you get a phone call, it's your grandchild, and it sounds exactly like your grandchild. And your grandchild is saying, I'm in jail, Grandma, save me, send me bail money. The scammers are using somewhere out there on the internet, your grandchild has a voice imprint stored somewhere, YouTube, TikTok, or wherever. AI scammers can take that voice print and make it say anything they want it to say, including, Grandma, I'm in jail, send me bail money. And we call that the grandparent scam. And no, it is not fun. Now I'm going to talk about smishing, SMS, smishing. You're all familiar with phishing, right? Phishing is when you get an email that's a scam. Smishing is the same idea, except for the email, it's a text message. That's the difference. Smishing is the text version of phishing. When you get a text that is unexpected, comes as a surprise, and it creates a little bit of alarm on your part, you can pretty sure guarantee it is a scam. Surely you have seen a text message from the Turnpike Authority saying you owe them money, right?
Well, I knew because my brother had gotten
Right.
it a month ago.
Yeah.
So I went to delete, report and delete.
My lady friend gets them from New Hampshire.
Okay. And the scammers have overdid this. Everybody is aware of the scam now, so nobody falls for it anymore. But when it first started out, people were responding to these scams and sending money.
My brother got it. He was very concerned.
Yeah, okay. So this is a classic example of a smishing. Again, it created, oh no, I owe the Turnpike Authority money, I better respond. That's what they're counting on. Oops. I don't think there's anybody in here that's actually looking for a job right now, I suspect. But if you are, it's very, very difficult to find a job these days, even in IT, even in cybersecurity. Companies are just not hiring right now. And so people who are looking for jobs get text messages all the time about job opportunities. Usually they relate to making very good money and also the ability to work from home. That's what everybody wants to do these days. They want to work from home. I just got another one just yesterday. Again, if you're not looking for a job, you don't need to worry about this, but if you have grandchildren or children who are in the job market, be sure that they're aware that if they get a job offer via text that they did not expect it and it came in as a surprise, it's a scam. And the thing is, these scammers are used the names of legitimate recruiting companies. It's still a scam. And we also see text messages promising surefire investment schemes. particularly with crypto. Here, invest in crypto. Here's a way to buy some gold, whatever. They're trying to con you into responding to the text and invest in your hard-earned funds. And here's something that's clever. You've probably got something like this too. It's a message that this one came, hey, I found your number in my contacts. Have we met before? I'm Dora. And before I had a chance to delete the message, she replied again with a cute emoji. Well, maybe I don't remember Dora. Maybe I knew this person from high school or something, so I might respond. That's what the scammers are counting on. They want to engage you in the conversation and see how far they can take you. No, there is no door. There's not. The best thing to do is click on Report Junk and delete. Here's one I got just not too long ago. Now, as I said, I retired a year and a half ago, and sometimes I have too much time on my hands, right? And sitting on the couch, watching TV, eating junk food. And if I got a text like this, oh good, here's an excuse to get out of the house and meet a friend. I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee with me. I would love to grab a coffee with somebody, but I don't know who this came from. They didn't identify themselves, and I don't know their phone number. That 706 turns out to be Jacksonville, Florida. So this is someone trying to engage me in a text conversation with them to lure me into scam. Junk. A scam. Here's how you spot the smish. Was it expected? Do you know the sender? And does the sender request an immediate reply? All those checkboxes mean that it's a scam. And if you think it actually might be legitimate, be sure you research it by other means. Don't respond without doing any research.
Potential scam right there.
Yeah. Now, I did a presentation with the FBI in Wyndham not too long ago, and they said tech support scams are the #1 scams the FBI is seeing in the state of Maine. Well, I didn't know that. The way tech support scams is, you're working on your laptop or your computer, and all of a sudden you get this big blaring message on your screen that says, your computer has been infected with a virus. Call this number for support. I found out not too long ago, my brother and his wife almost fell for the scam. They got this big message on the screen. That message told them to buy some gift cards, so they're on the way to the grocery store to buy those gift cards, and suddenly they thought to themselves, wait a minute, this didn't sound right. Fortunately, they didn't follow through. So anyway, anybody's had that message show up on their screen? Okay. If you do, remember, just ignore it, shut down your computer, restart, the message will go away, your computer is uninfected. So what can you do about all these messages that are coming in, these pop-up screens and everything? Well, there's not a whole lot you can do to prevent yourself from that happening. The best thing to do is react with no reaction. Do not respond. Do not react to that message. You can't stop them from coming your way, but you can keep yourself from reacting to them. If you forget everything else I tell you this afternoon, please remember this. Beware of what we call emotional entanglements. An email, a phone call, a text message that causes your heart to go, yes, or in excitement, I won the lottery, or fear, my grandchild's in jail. That emotional reaction, that need to react right away, is how the scammers get you. If you just recognize when you're being emotionally manipulated and stop, breathe, step back, disengage, you will stop the majority of scams that come your way. I hope that made you jump out of your seats. I tried to find a video that showed the shark actually jumping out, but I couldn't find it. The point is, you might have been surprised by this slide. That surprise is what the scammers are counting on, surprise and shock. And if you react to a surprise and shock event, you're probably going to get scammed, because most scams start with a surprise. If we treat all such surprises with a skeptical eye, most scams will be stopped. And I really encourage you to make a cyber buddy. It does not have to be anybody who's technically astute or smart. Just somebody you can call up and say, hey, I got this strange message or this unusual text. Can you help me think through it? And between the two of you, I'm sure you'll recognize the scams. The other thing you can do is call the AARP Fraud Watch Network hotline. It's in the materials that are available on the table. This is a team that is made up of trained volunteers who have seen every scam under the sky. You call them up, they will walk you through it, they will tell you why it's a scam and how you should respond. And if you should be so unfortunate that has fallen for a scam, they will point you to ways to recover from that scam. Great resource to have on hand. Where does AI fit into scams? Well, the only thing AI does is make the scams more clever. They can use your information to create crafty messages that look like they're legitimate, including a loved one's voice. But it still requires you to respond emotionally for the scam to work. So you please, always treat messages with a skeptical eye. If you get a message that causes your heart to go like this, that should be a sign to your brain, stop, breathe, step back. Remember these wise words from Ronald Reagan back in the Soviet Union days, trust but verify? That's actually great advice for the internet age with a slight twist. Verify first, then trust. Always verify before you respond to a message. Does that make sense? Call your cyber buddy or call the AARP Fraud Watch hotline. You have to ask yourself, did you really win the lottery? Is your grandchild really in jail? Do you really have a new romantic partner that's 40 years younger than you? Is the IRS really sending the police to the door to arrest you, and so forth and so on? The answer, my friend, is no, no, and no, and no again. And if you do fall for a scam, the minute you are asked to send funds via gift cards, Bitcoin, or cryptocurrency, or anything to do with crypto, or wire funds, that should be a sign. This is a scam. Stop before you send funds. Yep, scam. Now, there's another scam that is one of the most devious, most terrible, scary scams that are out there. And it's scams that touch on our tendency to be lonely these days, loneliness. Here's one I received that says, hello, how are you doing? Long time no see, I miss you. Hey, maybe that's from an old girlfriend, I should respond. That's what the scammers are counting on. They're counting on me being lonely enough to respond to a random text. There was an article in the Portland Press Herald back in February about Maine's loneliness epidemic. We are so lonely in this country that they talk about it state by state basis. And I was so pleased to hear about all the activities this group has to connect. That's how we defeat loneliness. And ironically, even though we have all this amazing technology to stay connected, the truth is we're more lonelier, more anxious, and more depressed than ever. The digital drugs have us hooked. Social media has made it worse. We've become too reliant on digital communications and less reliant in personal relationships, which exposes us to fraud in its many shapes and sizes. Here's an example of a romance scam. This is a story that was in the Wall Street Journal. It was about a 75-year-old man who had met a young Chinese woman on LinkedIn. Now, you wouldn't think LinkedIn would be a dating site or anything like that. It's for business purposes. But LinkedIn is where he met this individual. And over a period of time, he lost his life savings of $715,000 to this young woman. Once all his money was gone, that young woman disappeared. And the sad thing is, he still misses her. This is what loneliness will do to you. We hear this over and over again when it comes to romance scams. The victims say, I miss being in love. And they say that even though all their life savings has been stolen. Of all the scams that are out there, this is by far the most vicious, long-lasting, heartbreak, and leads to financial destruction. The FBI told me the other day that when they get this case that comes in, it's just devastating because at that point, the victim has lost all the money and there's nothing really the FBI can do. And the thing is, while the scam was going on, the family member of the victim, the friends, even the banker have told them, hey, don't send money, this is a scam, this is a scam. But the heart wants what the heart wants. And so the victim continues to send funds to the scammer until they're completely broke. So that's why it's so important to listen to your cyber buddy, your family, to your banker, and your pastor and law enforcement. When they tell you you are the victim of a scam, believe it. But I do have my own online girlfriend. This is Demireza. She lives in Ireland. She's quite cute, isn't she? Right? I really like her. We have nice conversations. Every now and then I send her some money. But don't worry, my wife also has an online partner. His name is Podok. And this is, by the way, these images are from a TV show called Podok. Has anyone seen that on PBS? Okay. No, maybe this is not true. We kind of wish it was true, but no, these are not really our online romance partners. Remember, just beware of those emotional entanglements. If you ever have any doubt, call your cyber buddy, call AARP. Think it through before you react. Okay, that's the first half of my two-part presentation where I talk about recognizing scams when they arrive in your inbox, on your phone, or via voice call. If you just train yourself to say, this is probably not true, you'll save yourself a world of pain. But before I go on, any questions?
I got a thing that I adopted, and I found that when I get a phone call and I don't know who it is, they'll say, is this Bruce? I never say yes, because they're looking for you to say yes and they record it.
Very good, very great point, great point. And toward the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you how to stop getting those calls in the first place. Okay, now let's talk about who the bad actors are. Who are the scammers? They're not your disgruntled teenager in their grandmother's basement. These are financial criminal enterprises. They employ or even enslave hundreds of people to work in their organizations, and they specialize in different areas, specialize in designing a scam, conducting a scam, talking to the victim, laundering money, and so forth and so on. This is what we're up against, and they're in it for financial gain. And the truth is, much of our data is beyond our control. Every day, every week, we hear stories about cyber breaches, data breaches. I'm sure you've gotten emails or letters from some of your companies that said, I'm sorry, we had a data breach. Would you like to sign up for this credit monitoring service? And again, in Maine, we had a huge incident back in 2023, a Russian gang stealing data of 1.3 million people. Because of all these data breaches, we no longer have secrets. The scammers have your phone number and your email address. They likely have your social security number and birth date as well. They can access your social media feed. And they may even pay data brokers to get access to your search history. If you're not familiar with what data brokers are, you know when you go shopping for shoes, all of a sudden you see ads for shoes when you go to other sites? Data brokers are taking all those sites you have visited and created a profile on you, and they sell that to other companies, shoe companies, for example. That's how they know all about you. Supposedly, these data brokers are only supposed to sell that data to legitimate companies, but the scammers get a hold of it as well. So what do you do about this? Well, it's kind of tricky. You have to defend yourself. You can't stop the data breaches. As much as we would like to, they're going to keep happening. So what you need to do is say, anytime one of my financial accounts has a transaction, we want to get alerted on it right away. We don't want to wait till the end of the month statement, which we probably won't look at anyway. As soon as a transaction hits our bank account, we want an alert. Either on your bank accounts, your credit cards, your investment funds, your retirement funds. Anytime you have a financial transaction, you want to be alerted right away. Here's an example. I have a Citi card. So anytime my Citi card is used, I get a text message. Just like that. Boom. My wife uses it too, so I'm no longer surprised when she gets me for Christmas and holidays. But one time I saw this funny looking transaction. $2.75 transaction was made at the City of Portland, MA, as in Massachusetts. Not ME as in Maine, Massachusetts. I better check this out, because scammers will often do that. They send a small transaction to your credit card, see if it goes through, and then do the big purchases. So I did some research and found out, no, it's actually a legitimate charge. I did park in the City of Portland that day. It did cost $2.75. It says that the vendor used the wrong state abbreviation. That's all it was. But if it was a fraudulent transaction, I would be able to act on it right away. Great idea for setting up the financial alerts. The problem is, every bank, every credit card does it a different way. And in order to turn on those alerts, you have to log on to your banking portal and find it where it's set up on your screen and says, send me a text every time my credit card is used. I wish I could tell you how to do it, but as I said, every credit card does it differently. And I would simply encourage you to call your credit card company and say, help me walk through this, help me set up the alerts. The other thing you can do is freeze your credit report. AARP has a handout on how to do that. If any of you frozen your credit report, it's a pain. You have to call 3 credit bureaus. They will give you a PIN, and anytime you want to unfreeze your credit report, you have to call them back to unfreeze it. You have to have that PIN. The thing, when your credit report is frozen, that means no one can apply for a loan or a credit card or a bank account in your name. The bank or the credit card company will not be able to pull down your credit report, so they won't issue a new account. It's a pain, but it's a very good step. And if you want to know how to set it up, there's a handout on the table there. In some states, the credit card companies, the credit reporting companies will charge you a fee, but in the state of Maine, it's free. So here's the thing with AI tools. When they do a data breach, when they hack into XYZ Bank, and they get your username and password, the first thing they're going to do is use those tools and try to log on to every other banking site that's out there to see if that user ID and password you used for that banking site is the same one you use for all your other banking sites. Follow me? So if you're Andy Chandler and password is password123, and I go to another bank and use that same ID and password, they can get into that account because I've given away my username and password. That's why it's so important to use unique passwords for all your sensitive sites. Amazon, all your banking sites, your healthcare sites, and so forth. Don't use the same password for those sites. Make sure it's a unique password. And we also want you to enable 2-factor authentication, which we'll talk about that in a second here. What can we do about this mess? Well, when it comes to data breaches, nothing. What we have to do is set up alerts in our financial accounts, like I spoke to earlier, freeze your credit report, and use unique passwords and 2-factor authentication. In other words, we have to be defensive. We can't rely on our banks, our healthcare vendors, our shopping sites to protect our information. We have to do it ourselves. And watch out for that emotional manipulation. Now, I said for all your sensitive sites, you should use unique passwords. So let's talk about passwords now. We all love to deal with passwords, don't we? Here are some quick password tips. I'm sorry to tell you this, but they need to be unique. I already told you that. They really should be 14 characters or more. The thing is, though, you don't have to make them a bunch of random characters, and you shouldn't have to change them every 90 days. In fact, the federal government has said it's poor practice to make people change their passwords every 90 days. Because what happens is people will use simple passwords. Like right now we're in spring, right? So they will use 2025 spring exclamation point. And then when summer comes, they'll use 2025 summer exclamation point. But when you use 14 characters or more, you can use a passphrase instead of a bunch of random characters. Something that you can easily remember. And then using two-factor authentication. You have used two-factor authentication, even if you've never heard that term. It's just a complicated term for something that's really simple. When you log into your bank, when you log into your healthcare provider, do you get a text on your phone that says, enter this code? That is two-factor authentication. The beauty of that is, even if the scammers get a hold of your username and password, they still can't log in as you unless they have access to your phone. That's why two-factor authentication is so valuable. I mean, the scammers might be in China or East Asia. They can't get to your phone all the way from there, can they? Okay, hopefully I convinced you that you need to use long passwords, 14 characters or more, and make them unique. How do you keep track of them all? You may have noticed that the browser you use, that's how you get on the internet. It's usually called Chrome, Safari, or Edge. When you go to a website, that's called, you're using a browser. Your browser has the option of storing the passwords for you. And that's fine. Now, if you were to go to work at Tata or any other organization, they would say, no, don't do that. Because if you store passwords on your browser, someone else gets access to your computer, and then they can have access to your passwords. That's true, but we live in the real world, don't we? We can't remember all these hundreds of passwords. It's better to use your browser to store passwords than to use simple passwords same password through multiple sites. So it's fine. Just keep in mind, though, that if you and your spouse share the same computer, when you log, your spouse will have access to all your passwords as well. What about password managers? You may have heard of password managers. Those are an excellent alternative. The problem is they're kind of complicated to set up. My wife is a beautiful, intelligent woman. She speaks more languages than I do. I only speak one. But she can barely spell a computer to save her life. Some people just don't have that innate ability to understand how computers work. So if I had to tell her to use a password manager, she's going to just look at me and say, but if you are computer illiterate and you're comfortable with using technology, yes, use a password manager. And you probably should do the paid version. It doesn't cost much, but you should the paid version will give you more options. And the beautiful thing about password managers is that you can manage your passwords with one app across multiple devices, your phone, your computer, your tablets. And if you want some recommendations for password managers, this is what New York Times Wirecutter recommended, 1Password and Bitwarden. I used to use something, and I still do to some extent, LastPass. LastPass had a major data breach several years ago, so we don't recommend that anymore. If you have an Apple, if you're on a Mac, Apple has an app called Apple Passwords, and that's an excellent app to use as well. What about writing them down? Again, if you work for a corporation, they're going to say, no, that's bad practice. Well, come on. What's the likelihood from China breaking into your house and stealing your password list? Not going to happen. So it's fine to write them down. And it's really safer than putting them in a Word document or Excel document. So yeah, write them down. You've seen those little books that say password managers, or maybe they have a fake cover? Use them. You may have heard something called passkeys, and this is kind of confusing, but It's the future. And it's going to enable us to say goodbye to passwords. With passkeys, instead of logging in with the username and password, we'll log in with our device. Our device will first authenticate us by using our thumbprint or our eye scan. And once they confirm, hey, yes, Andy Chandler is using this computer, they will send a message to the website. Andy Chandler is using this computer. Let him in without a username and password. Here's an example. This is New York Times. If you're creating an account on New York Times, you can use your old-fashioned email address and create a new password. Or you can continue with Google, Facebook, or Apple. I wouldn't do Facebook. But if you have an Apple device or use Google, you can use your Google credentials or your Apple credentials to log into the New York Times. So when you create your account this way, next time you sign into the New York Times is going to ask Google or Apple, is Andy Chandler using the device that this request is coming from? And if that device says yes, the New York Times will let you in. The beauty of this is you don't have to remember a password, and New York Times does not need to keep track of all those username and passwords. Because if they have a data breach, there's nothing to steal. The problem is, it really depends on your device. And if you lose that device, you're in a world of hurt. There are ways to get around it, but you have to keep it in mind. Okay, I'm almost at the end of my presentation. I want to close with this. What if many of our scams start with a phone call, right? Someone here mentioned. What if you don't answer the phone in the first place? Your smartphone, not your landline, but your smartphone, whether it's Apple or Android, has a feature called Silence Unknown Callers. If you enable this feature, you can take a picture. If you've got a phone, you can take a picture of this if you want. It's called Silence Unknown Callers. If you turn this feature on, that means when you get a phone call from an unknown number, it doesn't even ring on your phone. It goes straight to voicemail. And most scammers don't bother. They leave a voicemail. So that's the beauty of it. You don't even hear your phone ring, so you can't answer it. Well, how does your smartphone know the difference between a known number and an unknown number? And this is a trick. You have an app on your phone called Contacts. Your Contacts, anyone use your Contacts app on your phone? Okay, a few of you. And you're ready to use this feature. When the phone call comes in, your phone will look at your Contacts app and say, oh, okay, this is a phone number from your doctor's office. I will let it ring on your phone so you can answer it. But if it's not in your contacts, it goes straight to voicemail. If you want to use this feature, that means you need to use your contacts and add all the numbers of your doctor, your medical professionals, your dentist, your friends, and your family. And the beauty of it, once you have it with you, you always have your address book with you. My wife still keeps a paper address book, and sometimes or someplace, and she doesn't have it with her. I said, yeah, if you only use the Contacts app on your phone, you wouldn't have that problem. Anyway, but that's the key. You have to use the Contacts app in order to use this feature. There's one trick to it, though. And I have it on all the time. But the other day, I was expecting a plumber. And while I had the number of the plumbing company, it was Pine Tree Services, I did not have the phone number of that individual plumber. And he might call me to ask for directions to my house, right? So I had to turn it off, wait for his call, then once that visit was, turn it back on. So that's something you have to keep in the back of your mind. If you're expecting an important call from a number you don't know, you'll have to turn it off temporarily. Okay, please, please be like Safety Cat. Always, always treat unexpected messages with a skeptical eye. And again, if you feel that messaging creating an emotional reaction, bingo, it's likely a scam. Always verify, call a friend, call your cyber buddy, call AARP if you need help. Set up alerts on financial transactions if you need help with that, call your bank, and send calls from unknown callers to voicemail. Okay. That's the end of my presentation. I have a Substack blog if any of you would like to follow it. And there's my email address. If anyone would like to follow up with me afterwards with questions or speak to the group, please, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you. You've been very patient. I don't think anybody fell asleep. Amazing.